Today we're going to talk about value billing. So in other words, we're going to talk about how do you determine the value of the services that you render to your clients. And if you're new to this channel, I would really invite you to subscribe to our channel. Okay, so you want to know how much I'm going to charge for the services we've just rendered? Well, let's see now. I spent 7.83 hours on your engagement, and my charge out rate is $156.35 per hour. So your bill is going to be $1,224.22. Does that sound good? Good. We'll talk to you later. How many of you bill based on the time spent on an engagement in the multiple of hourly rate? That is a very popular way for accountants and bookkeepers to charge for services rendered. But what I want to talk about today is a whole different model on how to determine the value of the service that you render and how to bill for it. So value billing is not something new, and a lot of people think it is. And I've heard some people say, well, you know, the buzzword lately seems to be value billing, and I want to find out more about it. Well, I'm sorry, but value billing has been around a long time. I was exposed to value billing by my mentor, Grant Kirkup, in about the year 2000 or so. So that was about 20 years ago. But I've got some CDs by David Cuddle, and he talks about value billing. And those CDs, if I'm not mistaken, were originally done on cassettes, and I think they date from the 70s or the 80s. So this thing has been around for a long time. So it is not a new concept, but is nonetheless not a concept widely explained or discussed among practitioners. So today I want to dig a little bit deeper as to an alternative to the whole charging per hour basis and helping you find another formula to determine the value of the services that you're providing. And I think you're going to find that by the time I'm done, it makes a lot more sense than charging by the hour. And if you don't think it does, let me give you a different example. If you were to go to a restaurant and they were to say, well, this hamburger that you're buying is $12, and the reason it's $12 is because it took them half an hour to prepare, and their charge out rate is $24 per hour. You would say, well, that's a strange way of determining the value of the burger, because essentially you're not buying the amount of time that it takes them to prepare the burger, you're paying for a given product. So by the same token, I think as accountants, we need to talk the same way. So if it doesn't make sense to pay for the time it takes to prepare a burger, why does it make time to pay for our accounting services? So one of the humorous things about charging by the hour is that if you're being inefficient, you would charge more. So that makes no sense at all. So going back to the example of the restaurant, if you were to take a steak and buy it rare, it would be quite a bit less expensive than the one that you're buying that's either well done or even burnt. So it makes no sense that you would pay more for a burnt steak than you would for a steak that is just cooked to perfection. So the time it takes really makes no sense. Some services, I agree, it would be based on time, but there are certain things where we should be charging based on the value of the service provided. So then the question you need to be asking yourself is, when you're buying a service or a product, what are you really buying? And it doesn't matter what it is that you're buying one of two things. You're either buying a solution to a problem or a feel-good feeling. Now think about all the purchases you've done in the last day, week, month, year. You're going to soon realize that every dollar you spent was either a solution to a problem or a feel-good feeling. So I go up, fill up with gas, it's a solution to a problem because without gas I can't get to point B. I hire a lawyer, for whatever reason, I'm buying a solution to a problem. But my wife and I decide to go to the restaurant to just compensate ourselves for a week well done. Well, that's a feel-good feeling. So you're always paying for one of those two things. So the value of the service you're providing will be dependent on the severity of the problem that you're trying to solve or the gratification you get from the feel-good feeling. So as an accountant, you got to take that into consideration. And I keep saying, is if you can be providing a really great solution to a really big problem, that has a lot more value than providing a solution to a very small problem. And by the same token, if you can also make the client feel good about the solution, then the value of your services just went up. So people will often say value billing is billing what you're worth. And I even have a presentation, and that's how I call my presentation, billing what you're worth. And upon reflection and thinking about this, I need to change the name of my presentation, because billing what you're worth is a difficult question, because we may not be valuing our services properly. And I think as accountants and bookkeepers, we often devaluate our services far too much, or at least many of us, if not most of us, do. So I'm going to provide you with little tips on how to better gauge what your services are worth, and to give you a different way of looking at all the services that you're providing that might allow you and give you the confidence to raise the fees to where they really should be. So when evaluating the services that you're providing, I just mentioned a few minutes ago that one of the things you're selling is a solution to a problem. So one of the things you got to keep into consideration is the magnitude of the problem that you're solving. And the bigger the problem, the higher the value of the service that you're providing. So how do I value the services that I'm providing? Well, there are three things that you need to take into consideration. The first one, obviously, is time. And let's not kid ourselves. If something takes twice as long, there should be part of the fee based on the fact that it's taking you twice as long. So I kind of alluded that time should be completely out of the equation. I don't think it should. It still becomes part of the equation, because the time you put to the engagement is your cost. So just as the automobile industry will put a value on the car based on what they think they can sell it for, they will also take into consideration what it costs them to manufacture. So I think we need to do the same. So that is why I'm still a strong proponent of using time and billing sheets, and that you enter your time, because that will gauge the cost of producing the engagement. And that's still an important element in determining your fees. The second element is the perceived value of the service that you're providing to the client. And the reason I use the word perceived value is because how you see the value and how they see the value might not be the same thing. So I'll give you a couple of examples. I've got a lot of people who prepare tax returns, and they say, well, the tax return only takes me about half an hour. It's very easy. Anybody can do it. So I'm only going to charge a very low fee. Well, number one, the reason it's easier for you is because you've done 1,000 returns. So for the guy who works at the tire shop, preparing a tax return can be very, very cumbersome for that person. So preparing a tax return is not always easy for everyone. So look at it from the client's point of view, not your own. And the reason I also say you look at it from a perception of the client is because too often we look at the ease and the time and all of that it takes to prepare it. So another example would be a bookkeeper. They may say, well, all they need to do is buy this software and it'll do most of the work for them. Well, that might be to a certain extent, but you still need to learn how to use the software. You still need to learn how to reconcile, and there's tons of things you still need to do good bookkeeping. And there's a whole ramifications of things that can happen if you don't do it properly. So even bookkeeping, you got to be careful not to discount the value of the service that you're providing. And the other thing you got to remember, and an example of that is my brother. I've got a brother, and he once told me that if he had to become a bookkeeper, he would just commit suicide. So that gives you an idea as that bookkeeping is an extremely painful ordeal for him. So do you think that his bookkeeper has tremendous value to him? Unbelievable. And the third thing I kind of look at is the pain relieved by the service. So if the person is owing $100,000 in taxes and you can come up with a strategy that reduces a $100,000 bill to only $5,000, well, what's that worth to the client? Well, a crap load of money. So you should be basing the value of the service to a large extent on what you save that person in taxes. So the way to look at it is not only what you save them by way of taxes, but possibly how you increase their profits. And those are all things you take into consideration. But you also got to take into consideration non-monetary things, such as less stress, a better marriage. So a lot of people doing their bookkeeping is causing so much stress that it's putting their marriage on the rock. Well, what does a divorce cost? And I keep telling people, well, if I do your bookkeeping, it'll save you the cost of a divorce. And so you should give me half the cost of the divorce. And that's a hell of a lot more than I usually charge. So those are things that you should be taking into consideration when determining the value of the service that you're providing. The other thing that the price should take into consideration is the complexity of the transaction that you're executing. So if it's something that is really, really complicated, don't be afraid of charging significantly more. Because the reason we've spent so many years at school and so many years practicing what we practice is so that we can start doing it properly and doing it well and hopefully doing it quickly. So charge more for those really complicated transactions. The other thing that I look at is the perceived complexity, and it goes back to what I was talking about a few minutes ago. A tax return may not be complicated for the people who do thousands of returns like I tend to do, but it can be perceived extremely complicated by the client. So for a lot of people, preparing a tax return is very complex. So that should be taken into consideration. The third thing that you should take into consideration when putting a value to your services is the time of year. So at our firm, for example, we tend to charge a little bit of a premium for any work that's being requested of us during the months of March and April, because we do a heck of a lot of tax returns. So because we are so busy at that time of year, we will charge a premium during those 2 months. And you may say, well, that's a little bit unfair. Well, I disagree. There's a lot of things that you buy out there where you're going to pay a premium for the given time of year. So you don't pay the same price for the Grey Cup tickets as you would for a normal game. And it's the same arena, same field, but time of year. And the fourth thing that I tend to take into consideration in determining the value of the services that I'm providing is the competition. So if this is something that tons of people are offering, increasing the bill is a bit more difficult because they can get the service anywhere. And so let's face it, whether we like it or not, it will play a part into the fees that we can charge for a given service. But don't give it away just because a lot of people are doing it. But it is something you take into consideration. But also the other side of that coin is that if this is a service that very few people are offering, then that is worth a premium. And that's what I'm getting to when we're talking about competition. If there's nobody else doing U.S. tax returns, do you think we should charge a premium for doing U.S. tax returns? Of course we should. So it's not a bad idea to look for those services that are out there that not a whole lot of people are offering. And you can absolutely charge a premium for those kind of services. So I keep saying there are really two ways of increasing the value of the service you provide to your clients. In other words, two ways of increasing what you charge. Number one is to become God to the client.
And what to you would be God-like?
Change the weather.
Little rain?
Yeah, a small shower.
One small shower, you got it.
Hey, it's raining. You made it rain.
So if you can become the person that they always go to whenever they have a problem, then what happens is they will see you as the solution to their pains and be willing to pay a lot more for it. But in order for that to happen, you need to develop that very special relationship. And I could give you examples of a couple of accountants here in Winnipeg who charge dearly for the services they provide. And despite the fact that the service they're providing is not that odd or rare, but they really take good care of their clients. And they love their clients, and the clients know they're loved. And because of that, they're willing to pay a premium to work with that accountant because they think he's God or she's God. So you got to try and work towards becoming a God to those clients. And the closer you can become to that, the more the clients are going to be willing to pay for your services. And what I like about that strategy is that if you're like me, technical knowledge was difficult for me to come by. I was okay in taxes, accounting, and all that, but I wasn't as good as many other people in Winnipeg. And yet I'd be willing to say I was able to get more than many others because I was able to develop a relationship with my clients, and they were willing to pay a premium to deal with me versus one of my competitors. But it had to do with the relationship. The second way to increase fees is to become the person of knowledge, of authority on a given subject. And again, there's a few accountants in Winnipeg that my guess is that they will charge about $400, $500, $600 per hour for their time. And the reason they're capable of getting away with that is because of the fact that they really know their stuff. So they are so good in what they do, and what they know is so rare that they are now sought after by everyone in Manitoba. So if you can develop a knowledge in a certain area where nobody else has knowledge in, then that will reap you a tremendous rate of return on your time. So that's why when I look at my team, I encourage my team, if you want to earn good money working for me, then you got to become God to all of my clients, or you become really good at providing a certain service. And so I encourage them, learn how to do Section 85s, learn to do R&Ds, learn to do U.S. returns, because these are all things that not everybody's willing and capable of providing. But you can charge a bit of a premium for all of those services. So what I've done here is I've just given you a very quick overview of some of the things I look at with regard to value billing. Now, I could talk for a whole day on value billing. So what I've decided to do is we're going to have a whole series of presentations on value billing. So I suggest that you subscribe to our channel so that you don't miss any of those presentations, and stay tuned because I will talk more and more about value billing. And by all means, do not be afraid of sending us your comments and your questions, and I will try to integrate that into my next presentations on any matter, but now about value billing. Thank you.